Welcome back to the From the Garoffice Podcast with Micah Foster. Today, I am speaking with a college pastor, Chris Shepperd from College Station, Texas. And he's going to be talking about how they've been utilizing technology, especially during the pandemic and after the pandemic, as he's taken on more responsibility as more of like a campus pastor for his church, Brazos Fellowship. And so I am excited to share this conversation with you today. Hopefully you find as much value as I did. Let's take a listen. Hey, thanks Chris for joining me today on From the Garoffice. I really appreciate you, appreciate what you're doing for the kingdom of God and the ministry. And so why don't you just start by giving us a little context for where you're at and what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Micah. I'm excited to just have this conversation today. So like you said, my name is Chris. I'm a college pastor in College Station, Texas, which is the home of Texas A&M University. I had the opportunity to go to school here at Texas A&M and just never left. So I transferred down here, I think in 2008, and have been here ever since. I am married and my wife is a nurse at a hospital here. And then we have two little girls. They are 3 and 5. So our life is busy and full, and especially with her being in healthcare, me being in ministry, it has been a very interesting 10, 11 months. So,
yeah. So, I mean, when this whole pandemic started, right? Mm-hmm. I think I was messing around with Instagram Live and you happened to jump on and I invited you into my live and we just chatted for maybe an hour. And it was like, I think you were saying it was like 1 o'clock in the morning for you.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't quite that late for me, and people were jumping in and watching and things. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, wow, this is a really interesting, cool thing. And then everything hit and everybody went online for everything.
Yes.
And so it was like, we got this little taste of, oh, this could be utilized for things. And then it was like, we have to utilize things for ministry. And so,
now you don't have a choice.
Yeah. I've been talking to a lot of different pastors and ministry leaders who have been utilizing the technology at their fingertips to help supplement, to help change, to help impact people with the gospel of Jesus. And I'd love to know, as a college pastor, what have you been doing during this time to try things? What's been working? Just want to learn, man.
Yeah, man, it's been a really interesting journey. And I think that especially college ministry, I don't know, in so many ways, college students are young adults, right? We know that,
yes.
But in so many ways, it is a very unique life stage, and they are processing things differently and experiencing things differently, not because they're incapable of processing or experiencing like we do. They're just inside this bubble that has its own unique stresses and pressures. And so I think that for us in college ministry, especially when things started, we made the same choices, and now I look back and I'm like, maybe the same mistakes that a lot of other ministries did, in that we really just said, okay, what have we been doing in person that has worked well, and how do we video that and do it online, and just kind of try and make this seamless transition where it feels like, oh, everything's still happening the same way. But life was not the same and still is not the same. And it took us a little while to realize like that's not helpful for our college students. And you know, I know there were new, like, what's the word I'm looking for? There were new like phrases or terms that were introduced into our vocabulary, like Zoom fatigue and things like that. And it was so evident with our students. Texas A&M pretty quickly went 100% online. Like they never came back from spring break. And so, as did so many other universities across the nation.
Right.
And our students were like, we're living online. We are watching everything. And so for you just to come at us with another piece of content and another video that we're supposed to just sit there and not really engage with, but it's just somebody that's teaching us or doing what would have been a normal experience pre-pandemic, right. It just didn't land the same. And I think that was probably, for me, one of the hardest transitions, because I felt like what we were doing, man, God was doing some really incredible stuff, and we were seeing some amazing stories and amazing community happening in our college ministry. And then we were so incapable of translating that online, and it made it so hard, because now I'm like, we've worked for years and years and years.
Right.
I've been doing this, I guess, about 7 years. college ministry. It's like we worked over the last 7 years to develop an identity and to really create a gospel foundation that says this is how we approach ministry with college students in this community. And man, that pivot was so hard. So yeah, we tried a lot of different things. First definitely was, let's just take what we were doing in person and try and do that online. We did some of the Instagram live stuff. I saw a lot of different ministries trying different things, and I'm like, oh, that looks cool, let's do that. Or hey, that's a good idea, let's try that. So there was a lot of emulation happening. We're not going to call it stealing. We weren't stealing. We were just like emulating them, right? It's like flattery. So we did with like Instagram Live. There were a few different times. Hey, for the next 21 days, we're going to go live every day at 11 a.m. and we're going to like walk through this devotional together or walk through this book of the Bible together. And I would bring in different leaders, actually very similarly to what you and I did on Instagram at 1 o'clock in the morning for me. And it was just bringing somebody on and let's have a conversation about, okay, as you read this passage, what does this say to you, whatever. We got some pretty good traction with that. As with everything, it worked for a little while. And then they were like, okay, the novelty has worn off. I think even Cody in one of your previous episodes was talking about like the drive-in church thing. And it's like, that's cool for a little while. And then it's like, this doesn't really scratch the same itch. And so I'm not sure I want to keep doing this. So I think we have discovered that a lot with several different things that we've tried. It works for a little while and then it doesn't work for a little while. So it's been quite the evolution.
So what's happening now? Are you guys back to in-person kind of stuff? I know you're in Texas, so things are a little bit different than you're in California. So what's going on now?
Yeah, so for us, in the fall, we were able to come back a little bit. So we started back in August, and even here for our church, like we were 100% online for all of our stuff, kids, adults, youth, college, everything was 100% online up until August. And we started coming back. And so for us in college ministry in the fall, we did that as once a month. We would gather together once a month for services. And then we still would do our community groups that were meeting in person. And that we saw a ton of traction because they just wanted to be together and they just wanted to connect. And so we had to navigate that. And okay, we're still wearing masks and we're still following these, protocols and making sure we're loving our neighbor and doing ministry well, but also meeting the need of people who really wanted to gather together. And so we figured out a way to do that pretty well in the fall. And now as we are transitioning into the spring, just a couple of weeks ago, we kicked off the semester and it was awesome in person. But here's one of my favorite things that has come out of this season. We definitely used social media, right? But we didn't really use digital ministry as a college ministry. We didn't really use digital ministry coming into the pandemic. And one of my favorite things that has come out of this is our community groups. We decided in the fall, hey, let's launch a group that's exclusively online because we have some students who are not coming back into town. We have a student who goes to school here at Texas A&M, but his mom lives in New York. And so he went back for spring break to visit her. And he never came back. He's still taking classes online. He's still a student at A&M, and he had been a part of our ministry. And there were several other stories like that. It's like, okay, how can we continue to connect with them while also navigating? We want them to be plugged into the local church where they are if they are not coming back to this community at all, but they trust us and they trust our voice. And so we want to keep speaking into their life. And so that online group has been so cool. I think we have a girl in Indiana now, a student who just transferred this semester to a school in New Jersey who's able to continue to be a part of that group. The guy in New York, there's a girl who graduated and moved to Florida but still wanted to be involved, and students that are in a couple of places across Texas. So there's like 14 students gathering together every single week online, and about 5 or 6 of them are local here, and all the rest of them are kind of spread out all over the nation, which has been really cool. And then for us this semester, we are trying to do more in-person stuff, but also looking at what can we do to continue this digital ministry and this online group. And so, for us as college ministry, we aren't doing a ton of that. As a church, we're really embracing that. And like so many other people, my role evolved as well. And so it's like, hey, you're the guy who has a YouTube channel. You're the guy who knows online. So congratulations, here's your online audience. And so we've been pivoting as a church, and I've taken on a lot of responsibilities with that. just for our online community with our main church as well.
So would you be considered an online pastor?
Yeah, essentially, we haven't really changed my title, but as I've had conversations with our executive pastor and lead pastor, that's essentially what it is how can we walk with and shepherd our people? And we had a lot of the same conversations. It's like, okay, we started out as our adult congregation. Let's just film what we did and put it online. And people engaged with it some, but especially as we were able to come back to in-person, we recognized, one, we still are socially distancing, so our capacity is much lower.
Right.
We're probably about 30% of what we were running pre-pandemic in person. And so the rest of that is online. There are a lot of people who just have chosen to stay online and chosen to whether that's for safety concerns or that's scheduling issues or just a comfortability, like they are choosing to engage with us online. And so we really started having conversations. Okay, how do we minister to, how do we disciple, how do we engage with those people? And really that conversation started with the people that were already a part of our body, part of our congregation. And that has started to evolve into, okay, what does this look like to engage our community? What does this look like to engage the neighbors of our congregation? And so that has been where I've taken on some more, I guess, responsibility and ownership of that, of essentially what does it look like to like steward and shepherd those people. We're having conversations with our adult ministries who run all of our small groups. It's like, okay, what does it look like for us potentially to start some of these online only communities? And we're not there yet. You know, these are conversations that are taking place. And we've tried a lot of different our church is Brazos Fellowship, and so BF is kind of what everybody just shorthand. And so we did this series of videos called BF Talks, and they were more of this like discipleship type stuff. So it was like BF talks about the Bible, like where did the Bible come from? What's the story of the Old Testament, New Testament, in bite-sized chunks. It's like, here's an 8-minute video that you can watch or listen to on your ride to work, or you can gather together with your family or whatever. And so we've been doing a lot of that, trying to create some like discipleship content, which has been really cool and been something I've been able to be a part of, which has been fun. And also really now starting to have the conversation, okay, rather than just giving people a look into our in-person services, how can we engage people online and let them know, hey, we see you, we know, like, we're not just filming what we do, we're actually talking to you, we're actually trying to engage with you. And so some of that has been an online host segment that happens before our service. And so our worship is still in person and then streamed online. Our speaking is still in person and streamed online. But I come on pre-service and post-service and try and just connect with people. And so some of that is, you know, giving people shout outs or posing a question and trying to get them to engage in the chat, or bringing other ministries on. Like this past Sunday, we brought on one of the ministries to really talk about, okay, we are used to what's happening in person. Let's talk about what this ministry is doing for people who are watching online. You're sitting at home. We want you to know we still want to engage with you in this context. And so trying to figure out how to marry those two things together. And it's a interesting tension, but it's been fun.
So you guys you are developing your physical plus digital kind of strategy as you go along of how you're going to continue to have I think you said before we were using social media, but we weren't doing social ministry or something
digital
like that.
Ministry. Yeah.
Digital
so we
ministry.
were engaging on social media, and even as a big C church, well, not big C, little C church, our local church, we had a TV show that was a rebroadcast of the Sunday service from a few weeks ago or whatever. But that was it. It was like, yeah, we use technology, but we're not really choosing to engage in ministry with digital or with technology. And so that's been something that we've been shifting now. It's funny, if you like look in our community, I think most people in our community would be like, oh yeah, Brazos Fellowship, that is like the tech church. They have the TV commercial, they have the TV show, they use social media, whatever. But we weren't even live streaming pre-pandemic. And there were plenty of other churches in our community that were. And so in some ways we were kind of late to the game of like making that shift and getting into that space. But I think that it's been really cool to sit in on some of those conversations with our leadership of, okay, we really want to walk with people. We don't want to just create a cool digital experience or a fun video to watch. It's like, how can we actually walk with them? How can we continue to disciple, evangelize, and engage with people and help them engage with their neighbors and with their coworkers, whatever, and then using digital for that. And so, yeah, I wish I could say, hey, we have found the magic bullet and we know what that looks like. And,
Yeah.
We haven't, for sure. We're definitely looking at other ministries. And I know that you've done that a lot and you've mentioned that a lot on this podcast of other ministries that are really doing great in that space. And so then we find ourselves looking into those spaces and saying, okay, what are they doing? How do we contextualize that for our community, for our people, for our style? And yeah, it's almost like planting a new church.
Yes.
And I have not been on staff at a church plant, but I have been involved in a church plant, and that we really feel like in some ways, which I say I haven't been on staff at a church plant. Our church is only 15 years old. I've been on staff for 8 years. So it was on the back stages of church plant when I came on, but we had a building. We weren't setting up and tearing down by the time that I came on staff. And so, not that that's the only parameter for church plant, but you know what I mean.
You know what? It is a rite of passage. So
it is, absolutely. It is. But reading like Nona Jones from Social Media to Social Ministry, I think is the name of her book. And I think she works for Facebook, but she also is involved in ministry. And her book came out right at the beginning of the pandemic. But it really is. It's like, how are we creating an online church, an online campus to fully walk with and engage people and not just say, hey, here's what we do in person. If you like what you see, come join us. Like, we want them to come be a part of it. I think that there's a ton of value in them gathering together physically, but we also recognize, and I know that you recognize this, that's why you're continuing to do this. Like, this is the future. Like, digital is where people are moving. It's where people are comfortable. And I think that we are doing a disservice and we're being incredibly short-sighted and naive if we are dismissive of the trends and where people are headed, because there's such an opportunity to step into that space and do ministry. And so,
yeah, I think there's definitely a segment of people that used to come to in-person services that never will again.
Absolutely.
That are, I'm a committed Christ follower. And we can debate their theology all we want, but the reality is that's what they're choosing. That's what they're going to choose.
Yep.
So are we just going to drop them and say, well, good luck? Or are we going to chase them down? Leave the 99, go after the one.
Exactly. Because if that theology difference was about anything else, we wouldn't just dismiss them and be like, hey, you're wrong. You can't be a part of this. Like, we're trying to create environments where people feel like they can belong, even if we're not 100% on the same page about every single thing. Now, we have our core beliefs and our core theology, and we're like, this is what it looks like to follow Christ, certainly. But we also want to say, hey, you can be in this space even if you don't agree with us on all of these things. Now, what happens next? Like, what happens in your relationship with Christ? We believe a lot of that is dependent on your beliefs in some of these core things, but that doesn't mean that you can't be here. And so if we feel like that in person, how much more so should we feel about that online? It's like, yeah, theologically, we believe gathering together is super important, but is that to say that gathering together online is not gathering together? Like, can we not step into your living room by using technology and then link you together with someone sitting in another living room, and then allow for discipleship to happen, allow for community to happen, allow for like spiritual growth and development to happen? Again, that's where I say I feel like it would be naive and short-sighted to be dismissive of that. And we have seen that 100%. There are people that have been involved in this church from literally day one that have not come back in person yet. And they are completely sold out, love Jesus, fully committed to both the church and to Christ. And they haven't come back in person, and for different reasons. But absolutely, we don't want to dismiss and be like, well, good luck. I hope you figure it out. So,
Right. And there's something about people who have been doing and people who have been involved in church for a long time, big volunteers, they've been super busy in their involvement with church, and then suddenly they're forced to take some kind of a break from their normal routine, and they're finding some rest and maybe some healing where they were just sort of busying themselves over it and not allowing God to do a deeper work in them. And so now they're having that opportunity, and that forced opportunity for a lot of people, of actually digging into some of that stuff, especially as the pressures of everything going around have kind of revealed some of our own, issues, right? Because we're all in close quarters while we're under stay-at-home orders or whatever, and so tensions may run a little higher, and there's some things that kind of come up. So there's been a lot of that too, and I see some people kind of dealing with that, and also going, I'm not sure I want to go back to the hustle that I was in before.
Absolutely.
And I understand that. I get that. I've been doing the hustle of ministry for a long time, and it can get tiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that's an interesting byproduct that just even as you were talking, because I've had some of those same conversations with volunteers who, when that break was forced upon them, all of a sudden they took a deep breath for the first time, and things that they had the best of intentions, and we had the best of intentions. Like, we were never intentionally piling on or being a slave driver or being overly demanding or whatever, but they had a heart for ministry and service, and we had a heart for people and bringing people on to serve. But as they were kind of forced to take this break and take this breath of fresh air, they were like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize how overwhelming it had become, or how much I was overextending myself. And an interesting dynamic of that has been on the church side of the conversations we're having. Okay, we don't want to put that yoke on somebody. So what does it look like on our end to really make sure we're building in a healthy rhythm, and that we're not introducing an opportunity for people to overextend themselves or to be over involved or whatever else. And certainly there, devotion is important, and sacrifice is important, and all of those things are really, really important in our spiritual journey. But there's also a line, and there's also the health, the mental health, the emotional health, the physical health of the people that we've been entrusted to serve. And those are conversations that have to take place, that when you find yourself, I know it's been a big conversation for us. Our volunteer base is down dramatically, dramatically, and not proportionately with our attendance. Like, it has dropped more than our attendance has dropped in person. And so we've been having those conversations. One, how do we re-engage people? But two, are we adjusting and making sure that we're implementing best practices, that when people do come back and are involved in ministry, that we're caring for them and loving them, and not putting more on them than they need to carry. So
I think that sometimes, and people have been saying this in not so many words for a long time, I think sometimes the church, and especially modern church, has demanded a lot of volunteerism for the internal functions and workings of the church, and perhaps not enough provided opportunities to serve out into the community in which that church is trying to make an impact. And so kind of shifting a little bit, do we need as many programs or steps or whatever you want to call it? Do we need as many of these little pieces of our ministry? Or maybe we should simplify what we do internally and focus more energy out. I think that's a transition a lot of people are starting to deal with. I don't know if it's going to happen over the masses or whatever, but I think there are a lot of churches kind of struggling with those kinds of thoughts. And we have had those similar thoughts for a couple of years now. A few years ago, I think it was right after our 3rd year anniversary, we had a meeting of core families and core leaders, because our leadership team was talking about some radically different approaches to things. And we were saying, what do you guys think about this? It was kind of like let's talk about this, dream about this, give us some feedback. I'll say this, the people with small kids gave us the most pushback because what we were talking about did not give them the consistent children's ministry that they're used to and want for their kids, right?
Yeah.
We didn't follow that road because there was so much dramatic feedback, and I mean dramatic feedback. And so, and actually most of the people who gave us dramatic feedback are not there anymore. So now we're dealing with some of those same questions again, and we're like, were we onto something? And really had to do with, the basic framework was, what if we actually had in-person service where we called everybody together and had a service like we normally would once a month? And then what if we had a pop-up service somewhere? And what if we had, sort of outdoor pop-up experience, at a park or whatever? And we toyed around with it a little bit. We did one Sunday, our venue was closed. And so we used it as an excuse to experiment. And so we said, well, this Sunday, we're not Two Cities Church. We're Zoo Cities Church. And we met at the zoo and, had
awesome.
Had a little roadmap that we followed through the zoo together in a picnic. It wasn't a service. It was like more hangout. And the kids and families loved that. I mean, they just had a blast. We even had some guests, come along that thought it was so cool. So thinking a little outside the box is really necessary in this time as we think about how we move forward. So we all have a lot of praying to do, I think. My word for the year is clarity. I'm asking God for some clarity on some specific things. My wife and I choose words for the year that we feel like we could focus on. And so that's my goal for the year is clarity on some real specific things. And so I'm continually asking God, can you give me some clarity on this and this and this?
Yeah.
And I feel like even in January, I'm just getting little pieces of it that are coming together. And so
that's awesome.
Anyway, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think that as we're in this place where people are at least aware that change is happening, I think now is the perfect time to be reevaluating some of those things. It's like, we, so many churches, yours included, made this shift entirely to digital, and it was new. It was different than anything they'd ever experienced. And it was like, this is how we're doing church. Like, we don't have a choice. This is what this has to look like. And as people have at least gotten, I don't want to say comfortable, because I don't know that a lot of people have gotten comfortable with it, but at least they recognize, okay, change is inevitable, whatever. Like, maybe this is, the pushback that you were getting and the pushback that I know we would get if we said the same things is like, that's not what I grew up with. That's not what I'm used to. Like, what does this do for my kids, whatever. And it's like, well, maybe we haven't had it right for a long time. Like, maybe we need to be reframing what church looks like, what ministry looks like. What are we trying to instill into our kids? Are we trying to instill into them that they know the order of the Bible stories in the Old and New Testament? Or are we trying to instill in them who Jesus has called us to be? What better way to do that? And I'm not a kids pastor, so I have two little kids, and this is a journey that my wife and I are constantly.
Speak as a dad.
Well, yeah, and
there you go.
My wife and I are constantly having these conversations of like, yes, man, oh my gosh, I love it so much when we're riding in the car and my 3-year-old just starts belting out Waymaker and just like singing at the top of her lungs. I think it's incredible. It melts my heart, but I want her to know the truth of those words, not just know the song. And so how do I introduce her to who Jesus is and who Jesus called us to be? How do I show her what ministry looks like, what life on life ministry looks like? And I have an advantage because I'm in ministry. We had, pre-pandemic, we basically we've had college students live with us before, and we had people over at our house all the time, and we were hosting community groups and whatever. And so our kids have an advantage in that capacity because they got to see it firsthand. But it's like, now's the time to be asking, whether that's digital or whether that's going to the zoo, like, what are those practices? What are those rhythms of, let's not do what we've always done, because we know where that gets us and it doesn't get us to the ultimate. And so why don't we begin to ask some of those questions and reframe what ministry looks like? And it's painful, and too much change at one time can be a really difficult thing, and it causes whiplash, and we have to make sure that we're protecting our people in that capacity as well. But man, I love that you're asking those questions, and reimagining what that looks like. And, I am thankful, incredibly thankful for our kids ministry, because I wouldn't want to bring my kid with me into service every week, and they
Right.
need it contextualized for what their brain can comprehend
Yeah.
and bringing it to their level. So I think it's so important. I'm not in any way speaking against kids ministry at all. It's absolutely important, but I do think that there are other ways that we can engage all ages, all generations, and what the gospel looks like lived out. So
Absolutely. And I think the best opportunities that, at least that I've found with the most growth for my kids, is when, well, I'm wearing their hat, when we go to the Fresno mission and work with them, and they get in the middle of a bunch of people who desperately need Jesus. Now, here's the reality. You and I know this. Everybody desperately needs Jesus.
Absolutely.
But when you're homeless and you've got nothing going for you, you know your desperation a little bit more. And sometimes when we have income, a roof over our head, and all the necessities of life are taken care of, we as humans feel like we're pretty good. What do we need God for? That's kind of the thing. And that even happens, and I see it, people come to be involved in the church out of really desperate situations. They find some healing, they develop their own relationship with Jesus. Things start to go well in their life a lot of times, as they start to implement the principles of God into their life. Sometimes that actually affects their life in a positive way. You know what I mean?
Imagine that.
I'm not saying it's always easy. I'm not saying you won't have any trouble. I'm just saying that when you apply the principles of God, the general trajectory is a little bit up rather than down, especially if you come from a down place. Yeah. And so at least, talk quality of life and stuff. So when you see that and people have that little bit of healing, a little bit of upswing in their life, and then they go, man, that was great. Thank you, Dr. Jesus. I'm going to go back out of the hospital. Yep. And then they go out on their own again, and then they get up and they get into the same stuff. There's a cycle with a lot of people who do that. So the best thing, what I'm saying basically, is that when I take my kids to help serve people who realize their desperation for Jesus, they see the words of Jesus coming to life. Mm-hmm. It's not a theory. It's not something they just think about and we talk about. It's like they see it with their own eyes, and they're a part of doing something. And that's when I see the most helpful growth for them, when it just becomes real. Yeah. That's all it is. It just becomes real. If you grew up in church, there's a point in your faith where he goes from theory to real, where he goes from this is something my family believes to this is something I believe. Yep. And that is a super important transition in life.
And that's when faith becomes, I was going to say unshakable, and that's not necessarily true for everyone, but becomes a lot less shakable. It becomes so much more rooted and grounded, because at the end of the day, I know what God has done in my life, and you can't take that away from me. You can't convince me that it hasn't happened. You can't convince me that it's not real, because I've experienced it personally, and my life has changed because of it. And so even when I get into these seasons where things are uncomfortable, things are hard, life is just throwing everything it has at me, I am not going to say that I don't struggle. I'm not going to say that I don't have doubts or questions, but at the end of the day, I have a faith that I have seen in practice. I have a faith in a God who has moved. And so when that transition happens, like you were saying, when that shift begins to happen for people and it becomes real, that's when we also see them be like, oh my gosh, he's done this in my life. I want him to do this in my neighbor's life. I want him to do this in my sister's life. I want him to do this in my kid's life. And it becomes this thing that it really becomes irresistible, because we see what God's doing and other people start to see what God's doing. And so it's how can we create more of that? Right? I don't want to create more consumerism. I don't want to create more comfortable seats for people. How do we create more of what is right now super catchy, life change, right? How do we create more life change that's irresistible, that other people are I knew you before and I see you now. You're not the same person. I want that. I want what you have. And that to me is the beauty of the gospel being lived out on a day-to-day basis. And so how do we make ministry about that? How do we make digital ministry about that? How do I make college ministry about that? So much easier said than done, but it's so beautiful when it happens.
I've been plagued with this question for 3 or 4 years. I've just been asking it continually. How do I help the people who are a part of our church give more of their life away? That's kind of a guiding principle for me. Is this initiative, is this thing that we're talking about doing, is this thing that we want to do gonna help people give more of their life away, their resources, their time, their energy, their love? Like, how are they going to give? Because that's the whole thing, is like being generous with what God has given us, whatever it is. I think it's foundational to being a Jesus follower. He seemed to model that everywhere he went. Even when he wasn't necessarily intending to, people would, touch him and take some of that gift away from him, and then he would turn around and say, "Hey, go in peace. Your faith has healed you." And I think that's a great model for what we should be striving for in discipling people. Now, I think it's super important to have an understanding of Scripture. I think that's super important. I think it's really important to have private spiritual disciplines that are really a part of the mark of following Jesus, following his example and that sort of thing. But I also think that a big part of the mark of following Jesus is giving away what we would say is rightfully ours in a lot of ways. And so being generous with what we have. We need to emphasize that, maybe even more than I think we have in the past. So much of what we've done in church world is try to build the gathering. Build the gathering. And I think that there's something to that. I think it's important. But what does the gathering do? And what do they do as they leave the gathering? And is their life any different? I think that what happens aside from the gathering maybe authenticates why the gathering exists, or you know what I mean?
And it's shifting ministry from a come and see approach to a go and be, right? So for so long, everything has been about, hey, come and see what is happening. Come and see what God is doing. Come and see how we're doing ministry. Come and see what is happening at our church or who we are or whatever. And now it's like, okay, how can we equip and empower people to go and be the church? Like, our college ministry is 242 College. And it's Acts 2:42, and that passage 2:42 through 47 is talking about how they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. That obviously their theology was important to them. They gathered together for fellowship. Community was huge. Breaking bread, praying, right? There were these spiritual disciplines that were a part of their rhythm. But then what happened? They gave to the people in need in their community. They were together daily, and God added to their number daily those who were being saved. It doesn't talk in there anywhere about like these crazy pastors preaching these amazing sermons. Yes, we just saw Peter do that and 3,000 people were added, but it's talking about these rhythms that were a part of their community and these practices that were a part of their life, not just when they were inside the temple courts, but when they were in each other's homes, breaking bread and fellowshipping and praying and seeing God move in their life. Their community was so irresistible that the fruit of that was people were being added daily to the faith, to the way. These new followers of the way were coming along because of what God was doing in their life. And it's like, how do we do more of that? Like, I want to transition myself and our ministry from, hey, come to us and see what's going on, to, no, you're here and I want to equip you to go and be that and create that irresistible community in your dorm rooms, in your biology labs, on the bus route, at your work, whatever. So that has been a driving force for me and something that we're continuously asking. One of our, core principles is that we want to engage people in the mission of the gospel. And that's essentially what I mean, is what I just said, is like what it looks like for me to engage people in the mission of the gospel is go and do these things and create this irresistible environment for people.
It just reminded me, I have the girl who cuts my hair. I go to Supercuts. It's super cheap. It's down the street. And I go there because I've been kind of witnessing to the girl that's cutting my hair, right?
Yes.
So we've established a rapport, and she calls me her pastor. She doesn't go to church. She has sort of a mixed theology of beliefs, but I'm trying to point her to Jesus and all that kind of stuff. So she's always like joking with me, like, "Oh, here you go, inviting me to your church again." And I'm like, I'm never going to stop inviting you. But here's the thing. We're under the assumption that if we can just get them in the room, that something's going to happen. And I think that's true for so many people. I've witnessed it. I've seen it, right? she has never come and keeps refusing to come to a service. Now, she can watch anytime she wants now because we're online. It's super easy. She can engage in that. Super easy. Our groups are online. Like, everything is online. It could be super easy for her if she wanted to do that. But the thing that she has gravitated towards is when we do things with the mission. And she'll go down and she'll cut homeless people's hair with us.
That's awesome.
So it's like, come and see us go and be. Like, come with us and see us go and be. And that is a way more convincing gospel message than coming and watching people have their own kind of personal worship experience and receive a teaching and some fellowship together. It's like, they're kind of wide-eyed, like, I don't quite get it, because they haven't seen what the impact of God on someone's life in a powerful way. And it's like the service doesn't make sense to people until they have that faith, and then they have that personal experience. Anyway, that's some of the stuff I'm thinking through.
Yeah, no, that's good. I love that.
Well, man, I don't want to keep you much longer, but I really appreciate you hanging out with me for this time. And
absolutely.
And I'll give you an A+ on your technology because you have a crisp image and a clean look. Look at that. It just looks so nice. What equipment are you using right there? What are you using? I know someone's wondering.
It's a Sony a6600 going into a cam link on my MacBook, and I just have a ring light off to the side. And then I just have some strip lights that are on the back of my desk and the back of my computer. So
that's cool. You are plagued with the same thing I'm plagued with. You cannot look into a ring light. You got glasses.
Nope. Yep.
You got glasses.
Yep. Yeah, I did a lot of, and honestly, until we started, now I can see the blue from the screen or whatever, but I was moving it and playing around with it and trying to get it. Because when we were fully quarantined, I had a space that got set up at home and created this environment that was essentially my Garoffice. Actually, it was in the garage for a while.
I remember.
But I live in Texas, so I couldn't stay in the garage for very long because it was really hot. But I also wasn't wearing glasses at the time. So these are only about 6 weeks old for me of wearing them all the time. So that has definitely changed my video game of having to play with lights a little more. And I'm looking at maybe some soft boxes or something like that, because we're in the process of building a home, and I'm going to have a kind of a dedicated office space that I'm going to turn into a little, hopefully essentially a little YouTube studio. And so I've been playing around with what lighting could look like and stuff, because glasses are my new reality. So
hey, where can people find you if they want to find you?
So Chris Shepperd on YouTube. I think I am struggling to get my unique whatever title for YouTube. I have enough subscribers, whatever, but my account has been around since 2008, and it was Mac Aggie because I'm Texas A&M, and so I think I'm stuck with that, and I can't change it. So YouTube.com/Mac Aggie, but also C Shepperd on Instagram. Just some of my life.
Appreciate you hanging out and giving us kind of what you're learning. Hopefully it's helpful to somebody else. If it is, why don't you go ahead and give them a follow on Instagram or something and let them know. Thanks for sharing. But man, God bless you. God bless your ministry. And I can't wait to hear how he uses this next season as we figure out what is next. Let me know. Yeah. Keep me informed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Micah.
Thanks, man. Well, I hope you found value in that. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you have questions for Chris, again, you can find him on Instagram, or you can comment below and I'll make sure he gets the comments. If you enjoyed this and you want more content like this, please consider subscribing to our podcast, which you can find on any of your favorite platforms. Just search From the Garoffice or subscribe to our YouTube channel, From the Garoffice with Micah Foster. And make sure that you give us a like, share it with somebody you think would find value in it. And if you want to support this channel and all the things that I'm doing digitally, then you can support me with the links below. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next one.